Shelli and Dino, like talking about, being Black, being Asian, being queer, having those social identities, and having sometimes that allows us access to other talent who share those identities, right? Can you talk about the double-edged sword that comes with that?
I think one of the things is that, like, I've just realized this recently, is that it's like there I know that kind of this whole program is to kind of help journalists with their careers and stuff. And I think what I've realized is that, like, for me at least, there was no blueprint in how to be a queer Filipino journalist. I had no idea what I was doing when I have a journalism degree. I was trained in J school. I don't know if that even exists anymore. But I was trained to interview and stuff, and it's like, oh, but like what I've realized is like I'm kind of like I'll just making it up as I go along, as I say, because in essence, I don't know if Crit and Shelli, if y'all, and even in Cooper, and if we feel this way, it's like when we got our jobs, right? It's kind of like, oh, we've been working for this all our lives, and then we just get thrown into this thing, and you're like, oh, wait a second, what's going on? And then it's like, oh, you kind of just follow your wiles, and you're just like, okay, well, I was trained to do this. Let me see if this works. And then it does. And then you just keep going. And I think that, like, being in this kind of like industry, and like where, I don't know, where we've never had an example. I've been like, I think this upcoming generation of journalists, they're like, oh, okay, we have an idea of what we want to do, but now also there's this thing of like identities playing a role in your coverage, right? And I love writing about the Asian community. I love writing about the queer community, but also I am able to write about a movie about white people because that's all I've been watching all my life. So, I'm used to that, but I'm also used to the Filipino experience. I'm also used to the queer experience, but that's on a monolith. But I'm able to do more than just what is expected of me. Like, speaking to that, Cooper, when you were saying, like, when you see another Polynesian, you're like, oh, I feel seen. When I walked into that newsroom at Deadline, I saw only one person of color in that room, and I was all, you and I are going to have to be friends. You and I, yeah. I was all, you and I are going to have to be in this together. And we created, me and Amanda and Duca, God bless her. I love Amanda, my co-host at New Hollywood at Deadline. We created 155 episodes of a podcast that won a GLAAD Media Award, and did it get I may be going on a tangent here, but did it get the respect that I thought it could have gotten? No. From my co-workers, no, but from the outside people that it was serving, yes. So that's kind of like, I think what makes this a good journalist is that, like, oh, you're not just looking out for yourself. And listen, I know that we're in this industry where we are so in close proximity to power, where we're in so close proximity to people who we admire, who we we like love, we've seen on the screen. But at the end of the day, it's this like weird business where it's just like, and we're all like, and I think a lot of the time in this industry, we forget that we are human and that we have feelings. And I know I really kind of went off the rails here, but I just, it is just interesting to be a journalist and like now finally realize the space that I'm occupying as this queer brown journalist that I've never seen before. And I'm hopefully making space for someone else, because listen, I'm tired. It's like being representation is just as much as preservation, I feel. And like, I'm ready to move on from this, kind of toxic workplace, and like kind of leave some, space for other people to kind of help do the work with me. And I don't know if I answered the question, because I totally just like went,
no, we love a tangent.
The left field. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Tangent free.
No.
I love it. I do miss the podcast, Dino. I do miss it.
Well, I have another one called Problematic Fave, y'all.
Just a little plug.
We love a plug. We love a tangent and a plug. But no, I was thinking, I mean, like, same vibes though. When I first got into it, like you said, like you're kind of like, oh, I've been going to do this my whole life. Like I've been like reviewing movies and stuff in my notebook since I was a kid. It's just like I was my only audience, you know what I mean? But then when I got into the game of actually doing freelance work as a Black person, as a Black queer person, as a Black queer like fat woman, those are 3 places where people were like, you can be here. You feel me? And I will say at the top of my career, I absolutely did trade like trauma for clicks because I thought that was my only way in. Right. So I was writing a lot of like personal narratives wrapped up. That's mainly how I think that does I know that that's what makes me stand out in my work as a culture critic is I tend to write reviews and stuff with a personal narrative. I will find a connection, even if it's something that does not look like me or is not for me or for people who look like me. I can ultimately find a connection and write my review within that. But before I got to that point where I had to realize I don't have to like either give so much of myself or trade my trauma in order to like get more opportunities, I did it for a while and it really sucked, but I thought it was because it was my only way in. And I know that a lot of people who were maybe like 5 or 6 years ago writing a lot of different places, like if you look at some of these reviews, especially a lot of the heavy-handed like Black or queer movies that were coming out back then, all of our reviews were soaked in trauma. You get what I'm saying? But we were getting more jobs from that. So it was a big fear for me as a journalist, like 2 or 3 years in, to be like, I have to stop doing this because it's making me not want to write. It's making me not want to share. It's making these films I'm watching, these people I want to interview and all this stuff really suck for me because they only want to hear from me because I'm a Black girl and there's this movie about a sad Black girl. There's a movie about a queer girl who's been rejected by her family. And then I come from a religious background. So people would be like, tell me about that trauma. And I'm like, oh my God, for $400? Absolutely not. But like, it was really bad. But once I decided to stop doing that, it was really, really scary though. And I will say that for marginalized journalists, at least for me, I was worried that if I stopped doing that, my opportunities were done. If I just wanted to write about Bob's Burgers because I want my future child to be like Louise Belcher, like no one wants to hear that. Everybody wants to hear a sad version of me from that. So I thought I was never going to get a chance to do that. But then I did. Because it wasn't just that people were liking reading about my trauma. People were liking reading about my work because I'm great at what I do. But I will tell like new journalists and stuff, it's scary. I know it's super scary to put your foot down and be like, let me write about stuff that also doesn't look like me. I'm sorry, I live in a pop-in neighborhood, so we're all just gonna have to.
Yo, I live in Hollywood, Gotham City, so I get it. No judgment.
But yeah, like to wrap it up, it's just like I know that it's gonna be like a little scary to be like, no, I'm not just gonna write about this because I'm queer. You have to sort of play people a little bit. You got to play the game to get in the game and then twist the game to fit you. You know what I mean? And once you do that, then you get on the level where you're making a lot of the decisions. You're making a lot of the being like, I'm going to write about this Black queer thing because it is my people and they deserve to hear about it from someone who's Black and queer. But I'm also going to write about the bear because white boys in service are interesting to me. You know what I mean? So it's just like, so yeah, I know it's going to be hard. And last thing, Dino, like you said, it's like representation is exhausting, right? Mm-hmm. And we've been doing this thing like, I've only been in the game for like 6 or 7 years or something, but like what I've been trying to do, especially with things like this, is so that people who are trying to get in the game now, it's a little easier for them. Yeah. They don't have to start off with trauma. You know what I mean? They don't have to do like Cooper said and be like, oh my God, there's only one of us. Do you want to be best friends? There's 8 of us. You know what I mean? So like, but we're all still going to be friends. but yeah, so. Yeah.
Well, I want to say also like I think this industry builds its reputation on the only way achieving success is to suffer. And I think, we need to do away with that, especially within our own communities, our own intersections and our own identities, because there is just this like wild misconception that you have to suffer in this industry in order to succeed. And I don't think that's true. Although I feel like I have, that doesn't mean the person behind me has to. You know what I mean? So it's like, no, you don't just be, you know, you don't have to work for someone who is an utter I'm sorry, not sorry, who is just a jerk, just so you could like move up half a rung on a ladder. There's other ways. And I feel that the more we do that, we're like seeing, I do feel like in this industry right now, there is this movement happening that's like look at what's happening with the WGA. You know, it's like there's just like this movement that's happening that like as cliche as it sounds, they're like, we're tired and we're not going to take it anymore. So, you know, the new journalists coming in, especially journalists of colors or from intentionally exploited communities, you know, just know that you don't have to suffer in order to succeed. That's just kind of like my big kind of piece of advice.
I was just going to add, you know, Shelli and Dino, one of the things that you guys touched on that I would love to recommend for new journalists is, yes, in terms of being a marginalized journalist, BIPOC writer, it's very important to, you know, watch the shows that represent us, right? Whether that's an Asian show, Black, queer, whatever it is. But it's also great to go outside, or even like Latinx. It's great to go outside of that. And like one of the things that we look for, you know, the things that we do, or like in my role, is like we try to identify BIPOC writers that are writing about shows that don't have cast members that are of color, because we want to hear from their voices, their lens of like, okay, like for example, not to give a plug, but like White Lotus, right? Like that in itself, or Successions, like we're all the people of color. Like White Lotus season 1 was in Hawaii, but like where were all the Hawaiians? Where were all of our native Hawaiians there? Like what's going on? Or, you know, Succession, like very wealthy billionaires in New York, but yet there's no one of color. And so, but we have writers that journalists are covering it, and we want to hear their voice, their perspectives of it, and we want to tap into that, right? So like as a new journalist, I would always recommend like, do not be afraid to focus on those types of topics and, you know, pitching those to your editors. Instead of only focusing on like, well, I'm going to write on this show because there's an Asian actor or there's a queer person, and that's the only reason why I'm going to, you know, support it, which is great, but like, don't be afraid to go outside of that bubble.